how about we once again go on a deep dive into the microcosmos of our ancient coins? Let's zoom in very close and see the small details that might escape our naked eye, which make our coins fascinating. I am once again visiting in this video the wonderful website of the Artemis collection, which I'm going to link in the video description down below, and we're using its ultra zoom feature to look at their coins from up close. This website has everything that, in my opinion, a great collection should have to be properly displayed online. Good camera work that allows us to see the coins up to its smallest detail, good, well-curated articles describing them, rotating shots that gives a 3D image of each coin and allow us to see how the light reflects on a coin and its volume. And it is basically the closest you can get without actually being present and touching a coin, handling a coin. I strongly recommend after watching this video that you pay them a visit and, just like me, spend hours looking at their gorgeous material. So, well, without much further ado, let's look at some coins. And we start on ancient Greece, at the city of Aspendos. Throughout the archaic and classical periods, this city was rather prosperous, as these coins are surprisingly common nowadays. What we have here is a stater, minted between 375 and 370 BC. Well, there's so much going on here. These coins are very popular with numismatists as they show athletes on both sides. The first thing that calls my attention is the reverse, a very fine looking slinger here. The folds on his clothes and the curly details on his hair are both quite remarkable. As we go to the bottom, we have a very nice eagle by the athlete's feet, and at the fields, a triskeles, the three-leg symbol. And there's some very dramatic red-purple toning forming on certain areas. Now heading to the obverse, wow, what happened here? The obverse of these coins typically shows two wrestlers fighting. We can actually make out the shape of the two men with their interlocked arms, but why is the obverse so fuzzy looking? The surface of the coin is kind of lumpy, almost with a wavy texture. This does not seem to be a result of corrosion or any damage done to the coin because the entire surface has a very old looking patina over it. But instead, this might actually be the result of a very, very worn die. The lumpiness on the fields could be the accumulation of rust or the simple change of shape of the die surface resulted of the frequent use, well beyond the time that it's supposed to be changed. We then continue to this denarius of Emperor Severus Alexander, and no, this is not a gold coin despite its golden color. I've picked this coin because it is a prime example of what can toning do to a coin when left alone for enough time. The coin has been completely covered by a yellow-orange patina, which gives it this dramatic color. The piece itself has practically no wear. If we zoom in on the laurel wreath and the ear, we can see some very minor wear there, but all in all, this coin would be what we classify as an extremely fine example. Looking around the bust, the toning actually helps us appreciate the flow lines, the result of the displacement of the silver from the center to the edges of the coin after striking. We can also notice it as we move around the bust and look at the legends. Sadly, this coin, like any silver coin, will eventually turn black, but this will take a very long time depending on the storage. For now, fortunately, we can appreciate this beauty in its golden glory. Heading to the reverse, once again, almost nowhere apart from some minor points on Anona's head and torso. We can see the flan of this coin was struck in is a very good size. It's quite broad because the circular beading, it's almost completely inside the flan. And as a little curiosity, look at the letter N at Anona, like the word Anona. This is a little perk of Roman coins I was never able to fully understand. The N's many times look like three separate straight lines rather than a fully formed N letter, as we know. But as we go to the right side of the reverse, we can actually see another fully formed N. My theory is that, well, this could basically be a lack of skill in the part of the engraver, but also that shortly after being engraved, a proper N in the die, and the die was being used to make some coins, the little creases, the little connection points between the ends, material quickly accumulated on parts of the end letter, forming a gap and resulting in this disconnection between the parts of the letter N. Continuing on the topic of toning and patinas, how about this sestertius of Emperor Antoninus Pius? Very well executed coin, nice round flan and very elegant bust. Heading to the obverse, the first thing that calls my attention is in the middle part of Antoninus's face, which is actually the highest part. Sadly, base metal coins are much more reactive and prone to corrosion, so it looks like this area had to be treated for some sort of corrosion. Fortunately, whoever did it was successful at it. There are no signs of bronze disease or anything left. We can barely see some spots of yellow brass coming through, and either the zone was repatinated skillfully or this repair job was done quite some time ago, because as we can see, the patina already developed over the exposed brass and we only have little spots left. The rest of the obverse is uniformly covered with a very thick and very pretty green patina that helps highlight the details. Under light, this kind of green toning has almost like a waxy texture to it. It's quite impressive, it's quite unique. The same thing can be observed on the reverse. Although the coin is in good shape, we can notice a fair bit more wear here. This is to be expected as base metal coins circulated much more than precious metal pieces, and you tend to find them with worn parts, particularly so the reverses. To the right side of Salus on the reverse, we notice that we have a case of double strike. Look at the letter C. It clearly has two impressions on the front, both in slightly different positions, as well as the remaining letters to the right side, which all shows something akin to like a ghosting effect of the letters next to it, as the coin likely needed two strikes, and between strikes it slightly moved to the side or something. From the golden age of the Roman Empire under Antoninus Pius, we go to the crisis of the 3rd century at its worst moments, under Emperor Gallienus. This is a coin struck at Alexandria, Egypt, a tetradrachma, an old descendant from the imposing silver tetradrachma struck by the Greeks. But as we can see here, by his reign, it had just traces of silver left in it. This coin is made out of an alloy called potin, which could be loosely translated to pot metal, because it was just a mix of cheap materials to churn as many of these as possible. So you could find in the alloy of this like zinc, copper, lead, and just a tiny amount of silver to give it intrinsic value. But despite the rampant debasement, aesthetically, this is quite an impressive coin. On the obverse, we see this rather lumpy bust of Gallienus. In the unique Alexandrian style, you see that the emperors look quite unique in Alexandria coins compared to imperial issues. The entire coin has this deep, dark patina, likely from being buried somewhere very dry, probably some desert area, as we can find some solidified lumps of sand and dry soil still attached to the coin. Next to the emperor's head, we can actually see hints of the coppery look this coin once had, as the patina is a bit thinner there. The coin also presents some very pronounced flow lines, which are a bit less common for base metal pieces, as copper is naturally harder than precious metals. But as we can see, they're here present. This flan must have been struck when it was very, very hot. As we head to the reverse, we have this lovely eagle, very common reverse in Egyptian coins, but also my favorite. This is not a very large coin. It's around 20 millimeters in diameter. Therefore, the engravers didn't have a lot of space to engrave a lot of feathers, which gives the eagle this lumpy appearance. I'm glad that whoever cleaned this coin actually decided to keep a little bit of the soil still attached to it, which is much lighter. This generates a very gentle contrast that helps you appreciate the details on the coin, as pieces with this jet black patina can hide some of its details due to its lack of contrast. How about we go back to the Roman Republic? This is one of the so-called denarius serrati, because as we can see, the outer red edges have a series of indentations or serrated edges. The reason why they minted coins like that is still unclear. counterfeiting prevention, maybe something as simple as an aesthetic choice. It makes the denarius look like the world's fanciest bottle cap. Looking at the edges of this really nicely sculpted Jupiter at the center of the design, we can see right at the point where the bust meets the field, the flow marks, once again resulting from the striking process. This is one of the hardest things counterfeiter has to emulate, these flow lines. And some people use them to help authenticate a piece as the real deal. Heading to the reverse, the first thing that immediately calls my attention is this A-shaped scratch on the top of the design. If we zoom in, we can notice that the grooves, the little grooves caused by the cuts, have patina inside of them, meaning that very likely these marks were made back in ancient times. So what are they? Could they have been just some random post-mint damage? An accident that left a bizarre scratch on a coin? Or maybe could this be some rudimentary kind of banker mark to validate this coin, for example? It's interesting to wonder. Apart from that, something funny I noticed when looking at the quadriga design. If we look at the row of back legs of the horses, you can actually count all the way up to 8 skinny little horse legs, side by side. Great eye for detail on the engraver's part. However, when we look at the front legs, sadly we only have 5 legs. Where did the other 3 go? So for our next piece, let's look at this lumpy little guy here. This is actually a very popular type. It's a hemidrachma of the city of Chersonesos. As we can see, looking at the obverse, we have this very well engraved forepart of a lion. Checking out the mane and the face, we can see a fair bit of detail, even though these coins are very small, around 15 millimeters in diameter. We can even make out the details for the teeth, the nose, and even the eyes. Coming down to the body, sadly the wear erases some of the highest parts, but we can see a very well accomplished engraving of the legs and the torso, particularly so the torso muscles of the lion. So whoever engraved this actually had quite a good grasp on how the musculature of a lion and how the protrusion of the muscles in the skin looks like. The paw links seamlessly with the body, and unfortunately, due to the short flan, half of the leg was left out of the flan. But this is still quite an impressive little coin, very well made. Don't underestimate the drachma fractions. They're very small, but as you can see, they hide some very impressive art in them. Heading to the reverse, the first thing that calls my attention, in fact, is the quality of the metal. Greek silver was generally very pure. They did not mess around with the alloy as much as the Romans did. So as a result, you have coins that are very unreactive. Remember, silver is a very resistant metal to corrosion, so the surfaces in these coins are still very flat, very well preserved. Yes, they were clean, but still, it's impressive to see a metal in such good shape after 2300 years. The 2 main devices on these reverse are a little dot that is partly off flan, and this flower-shaped symbol at the other quadrant. And as a final point of note, we can see that when this coin was struck, the force applied was a little bit too much for the globular flan to withstand. As a result, we can see in the upper right corner, a little tear was formed. The strike literally teared the hot silver open, generating a split. Moving on, we have this absolute beauty here. This is a Seleucid tetradrachma of Antiochus VIII from the 2nd century BC. Lovely obverse. Also great silver quality, as we can see here, and how well preserved the coin is. Minimum wear. As we go around, we can see these very clear flow lines from the bust outwards to the border. The mix between flow lines and toning, like we have in this piece, looks really, really good. It's hard to explain without having the coin on hand, but the flow lines help reflect the colors of the toning, and it really creates this kaleidoscope of colors, like a rainbow thing. It's really nice. I'll then call your attention to a little flaw on this otherwise flawless obverse. Look at Antiochus' cheek. Here we have this unusual and ugly ridge, right? This is not wear, nor damage to the coin in any way. This was a defect when the coin was made. This is a die flaw. So after striking many coins, the die must have developed a fracture in this area. The fracture would generate a negative space that should not have been there. When the coin was struck, this space would be filled with silver from the flan, forming this deformity. The end result is rather interesting. It looks like Antiochus has like some sort of gruesome battle scar. Heading to the reverse, we have this very complex scene of Zeus holding his staff and a star on his outstretched hand. As we head to the star area, notice these black deposits over the coin. This looks like a case of horned silver, a chemical reaction of silver, one of the few reactions of silver, with certain chemicals on the soil that generates this black layer. It can be removed and treated, but it generally leaves a slightly rough surface when it is treated. So the owner looks like he decided to just leave it there. Also, let's check out the legends on this reverse. I quite like the way the Greeks made the legends. They first started, as you can notice, with little dots to get the spacing of each letter right. And then they would connect these dots and form the letters themselves with chisel strokes. As we can clearly read here, Basileus Antiocho. And on every single letter, you can see the little dots that made the area where each letter would be formed. Okay, time for another coin. This one is a favorite personal of mine. It's a late Roman Majorina of Constantius II. This is of the fallen horseman type. I've even made an entire video dedicated to this type. So as we go on the obverse, we have this very cool looking bust of Constantius, very stylized. Yeah, it's not as realistic as the denarii of the old days, but I still like the style of these. Zooming in on the bust, we can notice a dark patina with a texture that I could only describe as something akin to tar, with some spots of bare red metal poking from the high points. I wonder if this was a coin that had its patina stripped and then was repatinated later. You can find these coins every once in a while, like depending on the condition, whoever found this coin first, they might have judged it would be best to just depatinate the coin completely as the patina was too thick and then repatinate it with a smaller, thinner layer. It has a different aspect to the jet black and glossy patina of dry environments. In any case, we can see a coin that is clearly in pretty good shape. Some areas like the high points of the emperor's robes and some of the lettering display a gentle amount of wear, but not a lot of it. These coins were very heavy and had a considerable amount of silver in them, so they were stashed away quite often. The reverse of this coin type is so cool. Look at the intricacy of the poor barbarian falling down off his horse. How about the emperor spearing him then? Wow, there's a ton of details here. Notice the breastplate showing up from underneath his draperies. Also, looking at his arm holding the spear, we can clearly make out some details on his sleeve. These pieces were around 25 millimeters in diameter, so engravers could afford to add some small details that simply wouldn't fit in smaller coins. The face, however, it's funny, I need to admit, it looks like a robot. But all in all, I give this die engraver a pass with great merits. It's a lovely design in this coin, and it's a type that I always recommend for beginner collectors. Alright, one last piece before we wrap it up. Who doesn't like gods and mythological creatures on their coins? Here we have a stater from Leucas, struck in the 4th century BC. This was a city under the influence of the great city of Corinth. Some say the city was actually a colony founded by Corinthians. Both arguments make sense because, as we can see, the coins mimic the famous staters of Corinth, featuring Athena and the Pegasus. So let's have a closer look at this beauty. We start with this very elegant bust of Athena on the obverse. As we can see when we have a closer look at her helmet, we can notice quite a lot of relief. These coins have massive relief, with Athena popping up from the flank considerably. Sometimes the design was as thick as the flan itself. Some small bumps on the design might indicate that this die was starting to show its age, but we can still notice quite an exquisite level of detail here. Once again, we have a coin of very high quality silver. therefore almost no traces of corrosion or any environmental damage. And to top it all off, very pronounced flow lines all around Athena, which indicate this coin was struck with a red-hot flan and a particularly violent blow. How about this hole here? Whoever made this hole was considerate enough not to damage the image of Athena too much. By the patina developed inside the hole and its irregular shape, this coin was likely pierced all the way back in antiquity. Using coins as charms and signs of allegiance was rather common, and who wouldn't want to have this lovely image of Athena on their necklace? It would be a very heavy necklace though. Heading to the reverse, we are greeted with the famous Pegasus, the winged horse. The reverse has some very mild damage, some bumps and a series of delamination spots, as we can see in this area. Almost like if the silver wants to peel off of the coin. But fortunately, it doesn't detract to the fact the coin still, and the design overall still looks gorgeous. Under the Pegasus, we can see a small letter lambda, likely the initial of Leucas. The hole on the obverse sadly has disfigured Pegasus' legs, but I would say there could be worse places for the hole to poke through. So now I want to hear from you. If you could pick one coin and look at it in very close detail, which coin would it be? Let us know in the comment section down below. Once again, thank you very much to the Artemis collection for letting me show these lovely coins. Give them a visit. The link will be in the video description down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.